You know, there's no shame in admitting that you've been doing something wrong for years upon years. In fact, just last week I figured out you're actually not supposed to swallow the mouthwash. How come nobody tells you this stuff when you're growing up? Same thing with playing the major pentatonic scale. The more I get into this, the more I'm convinced that teaching the pentatonic scale is the worst thing. So we're rewriting history. We're going to show you how to actually play the pentatonic scale, which is really going to become the entire major scale for anything. And it's all going to be around major pentatonic. We're doing it first in the key of G, the people's key. You'll notice that I'm loosey-goosey today because I'm using a Sennheiser wireless system. This video is sponsored by Sennheiser. More on that in just a second, but let's get to the meat of this lesson, all right? So, we're gonna have a chord, a G major chord. And it's like, okay, what do we play if maybe we want to riff around, maybe we want to do a solo? How do we kind of expand our knowledge of just what G major is? A lot of times we'll be like, all right, start with a simple scale, a 5-note scale. Here's the G major pentatonic scale. Right? We've got the notes G, A, B, D, E, G. In fact, just last week I did one on the minor pentatonic scale and how to maybe improve on that. But I think this is an even more important lesson because this is something that you're never going to forget. All right? Now, playing in this hand position is how I learned how to play it. It's how most books teach it, how most like tab charts teach it, stuff like that. It's totally the wrong way. The only way this is going to be helpful is if you're playing My Girl over and over again. You're trapped in this position. And if you want to descend into that kind of madness, you know, go for it. I'm not gonna stop you from doing that, but it just makes so much more sense to play those same 5 notes like this. Okay? Same notes, but this is such a more practical version. We're gonna talk about why this is. So we're gonna start with the root note, G, the 3rd fret on the low E string. Now, you can play a G major chord in a plethora of different ways. You can play an open chord, you can play an open chord like that, you can play a bar chord, you can play chords down here, you can play it here. There's a lot of different ways to play G major, but usually when it's like, all right, well, let's learn all the notes that go into a G major chord and the scale, then we get into that static kind of hand position shape thing that links together. When what makes a lot more sense is playing it like this, okay? So all I'm doing is, I've got my root note, and then 2 frets higher, we've got the most symmetrical, you'll never forget this shape ever again in your life. 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7, okay? So, again, it sounds like that kind of, you know, not as exciting pentatonic shape, but we're gonna do stuff with this just to kind of get your memory to focus in on just a whole step across 3 strings, right? G, and then the notes in the G pentatonic scale. In fact, we're not ending on a G, so that's what's kind of like different about this lesson is we're actually going beyond the octave and hitting that 2nd note in the scale again. All right, so 3E, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7. All right, now, just with that, we can do a lot. Let's just take a G power chord. Right? That's just kind of messing around in G, playing stuff that makes sense in the G major pentatonic scale. Now where the magic of this is when we add the other major notes in the key of G. All right, the other major chords actually. So again, if you watched a lot of my videos, you know that the 1, 4, and 5 chord in the key are the major chords, G, A, B, C, D. G, C, D, all right? So bear with me. The same thing we did here, where we have this root, and then we have this shape, we can do on any of the major chords, in any position. So let's start with this C major chord right here. You can play it open, or you can play it maybe like, you know, an electric guitar version bar chord, where it's, you know, the 3rd fret on the A string is your C, and then we've got 5, 5, 5. What I want you to think about, you can maybe think of like, okay, well, my ring finger is actually holding down that 5, 5, 5 on the D, G, and B strings. It's the same shape where we just go 2 frets higher, and then we have that shape right there where it's 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7. So we have a G note, a root note, and then that super easy shape to remember. We have another note, the 4th note in this key, C major. And then from there, I do the same thing, and then guess what? For the 5 chord D, the 5th fret on the A string, we do the exact same thing. There's our root note, 2 frets higher. Okay, so now we have 3 chords, and each of those 3 chords has its own major pentatonic scale in a way that's much easier to remember, and then combining all those three will give you the full major scale, which you can do an infinite amount of things. So while that's blowing your mind, let me tell you about this Sennheiser Evolution digital wireless system. It is so nice to have, whether you're performing, whether you're just sitting around. In fact, the way that I actually use this most now, because most of my electric guitar playing is just in studio now, is I just have this hooked up to the pack. It transmits to the receiver right there, and that receiver is always plugged into my Tone Master, the Fender Tone Master Pro, which is just plugged into my interface, so it's ready to go whenever. I don't have cables bandied about, tripping over it, and this system is on sale right now. So whether you want a guitar instrument, this is the instrument kit. They also have the wireless mic kit that you can get. It's on sale right now. Really great. I'm a huge fan of Sennheiser products. In fact, both of the microphones that I use for this channel are Sennheisers. I have a Sennheiser shotgun mic on top of the main camera, and just as a redundancy, which is also super crystal clean audio, I have the Sennheiser Creator smaller shotgun on my secondary cam, which you're seeing right here. And I've actually also switched to Sennheiser headphones. These are the new 490 Pros, which are amazing. The best headphones I've ever had. They even come with extra like earmuffs, ear pads, depending on if you're mixing or if you're producing. So these also come with a plug-in where you can simulate a room. So if you don't have like a treated room with like nice monitors and everything, there's a plug-in that will let you simulate different listening setups, so you can kind of check your mixes and stuff if you're into recording music. You can check your mixes in different environments, so you're gonna get an accurate playback. Because that was always my problem, because I've always mixed in like trash rooms. So they're finally incorporating some really cool technology into the new stuff. Sennheiser's always at the forefront of the technology game, and they're super classy, cool people because they sponsor my videos. So get yourself a Sennheiser wireless system. Super clean, very transparent, no latency, as you can tell in this video. Sennheiser, thank you for sponsoring this video. So now let's take what we learned about this pentatonic scale and start doing it in a chord progression, right? Probably the easiest one to use is like a blues type progression where it's like a 1-4-5, where we got like a 1, and I'll just do like 2 bars of 1, then a bar of 4, then maybe a bar of 5, then 4, then 1. And you can always kind of add those pentatonic things in. So on. See, I'm making a little riff out of that, right? So I'm starting 1. I'm just sliding into that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 in the pentatonic notes, right? So that's maybe my first riff. And I can repeat that on any other major chord note. So let's do that on the G. To C. To D, C, to G. And that's just like a little riff thing that I came up with just using that pentatonic note, right? Now the other cool thing is this works all the way down the neck. So let's say I want to just take it in the same root position. Maybe I'll do like the G. Go to the 8th fret. I can get that same thing. I've got my root note, 2 frets higher, that symmetrical shape, and then the D chord, C to G. So it all comes from having a touchstone to start, a root note from a major chord, and then just doing that. Now we can do the same thing with an octave, okay, and learn the rest of the notes in the chord. So real quick, the music theory behind this is a pentatonic scale is 5 notes of what is like the full version would be the major scale, which is 7 notes, okay? So the pentatonic scale is actually leaving out 2 of the notes of the major scale. Real quick, I'll try to run through this in a way that makes sense. The notes in the key of G are G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. Now remember, in G pentatonic we have G, A, B, D, E, so we're leaving out the C and the F sharp, okay? So G major pentatonic is basically G major without C and F sharp, but those are the 2 best notes in that key, in my opinion, which is why, I like playing major 7 chords all the time. Now it happens when we add in the 4 chord, when we add C major's notes, C, D, E, G, A, When we add that, we're adding that C note to the G major pentatonic scale. Now we're just missing an F sharp, okay? And then when we add that D major chord, D, E, F sharp, now with that last major chord, that 5 chord in the key, we're gaining the F sharp, and now we've added the C and the F sharp to the G major pentatonic scale, and we have fleshed out the entire G major scale, okay? That's been my whole problem with like the pentatonic scale and how we kind of maybe overuse it to teach stuff, just because it's like, it's so easy to just rip through it, like forward and backward. I think we do a disservice from an educational standpoint because we're leaving out 2 super important notes, right? But when we do that and we apply it to the chords rather than the whole parent key itself, then we add those notes that we're missing, and then we still have all the cool we still have all the cool stuff that pentatonic sounds like, but we're getting a fuller picture just by adding where those other 2 notes reside, right? So I know a lot of people probably have already spent time maybe stacking pentatonic shapes on top of each other. Again, that's how I learned too. It doesn't mean that was a waste of time. It just means it's a perfect complement to anything that you might want to do now, right? So let's take an octave of it, and let's eventually end up in the relative minor of G, which is E minor, right? So again, E minor would be open 3, open 2, open 2, open 2, open 3, open 3, or across the octave 12, 15, 12, 14, 12, 14, 12, 14, 12, 15, 12, 15, all right? So we want to get from this 3-note thing with the coupled little 6 notes that add the pentatonic. Again, we have the octave in this one too, but I want to add this kind of idea of root note, shape, into that, okay? So how do we do that? Well, one thing we could do is we could take the octave of one of these notes and do the exact same thing. So let's start with G, and then go to the octave G. So the 5th fret on the D string. Now remember, we can just take the root note, go 2 frets higher, and then do that same shape. Or can we, right? There's the B string. That's what we always have to compensate for, right? So whenever you get to the B string, you can do the exact same pattern. We just have to remember, but then go diagonal 1 for the B string. So again, I'm on the 5th fret, and then I want to start my shape. 7, 9, 7, 9, 8, 10, okay? Now, a lot of the licks that I personally use end up down here. Like, I'll maybe be playing a G chord, maybe something like that, where I'm kind of getting the chord there, and then I'm starting, and then I'm grabbing the G on the B string right there. But you can still think of this as that same shape. Okay, now we do the exact same thing for the C. So let's go octave down to get the 5th fret on the G string. There's a C. I go 2 frets higher, and then now I do the exact same shape. Okay, now I just have to compensate for that B string earlier, and then I get right there, right? So again, there's my octave C, 5th fret G string, 2 frets higher, whole step, and then I just go down, shift, and that brings you into a triad C, which you probably already know from that chord. So now all these shapes are starting to kind of like line up in a way that makes way more sense contextually than being like, all right, pentatonic, minor pentatonic, shape 1. Maybe that stacks with shape 5. And then that stacks with shape 4, I forget what that is. You know, this makes so much more sense. This is a way better way to start kind of seeing these shapes, right? Same thing with the D, right? There's our D on the G string, 7th fret. I go a whole step down, and then that also gives me that triad D, 10, 10, 11, but that also comes from 9, 11, 10, 12, 10, 12. And guess what? Now we're on the 12th fret, and that leads us into minor pentatonic, okay? So we have a series of different shapes here, but the main shape is just taking 1 note, 2 frets higher, and then just ripping off the next 2 frets at a time across 3 strings, okay? Anybody can remember that. No matter what you're doing, you don't even have to be playing anything bluesy, anything. We could be doing something in the key of B flat, right? Let's kind of just rid ourselves of the people's E for a second. Let's go B flat major 7. And let's say I just want to vamp over it. No matter what I'm playing over this B major 7, which happens to be the 6th fret on the E string, I'm skipping the A string, 7, 7, D and G, 6, B, I can always remember that same little trick will always work no matter what kind of major chord I'm using. It's always giving me notes in the key in its own pentatonic version that's always going to sound good. So I can be like here. Alright, and especially if it's like some kind of weird jazz thing that's maybe using like a bunch of chords that don't go together. Like we could have that B flat, then like a G major, maybe C sharp, something like that. Like how weird is that? G, C sharp, B. And you always have something that you can do, and it all comes from just that one variation of the pentatonic scale that you'll never ever forget. And it makes it so much easier when you're wireless. Get yourself a Sennheiser wireless kit. They're on sale right now. Then get yourself some headphones. I'll also link you to the mics that I use to make these videos because, again, they are so much better. These mics have saved me so much because, like, especially the shotgun mic, it just kind of picks up what's in front of me. And, like, there's always a lot of nonsense going on outside, which generally you can't hear that often. So thank you to Sennheiser for sponsoring the video. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, send me in the comment section, Instagram, or the website. I'll talk to you all soon.